We are in the throes of a massive moral catastrophe. And so, to keep everyone positive, here's a kitten, and a puppy, and another kitten, and another puppy, and a Kickstarter page. And, well, more on this later.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson, and Sam Harris.
It's been just over a year since I reviewed the first live debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and I'm very eager to finally move on to their subsequent debates, but I'm going to do so in a significantly different way. Rather than dedicating a long video to each debate, I'm going to give each contention its own dedicated video, as this will keep things concise, dispense of distractions, is a lot more convenient for me as a creator, and it's a great way to stay in shape. So with that, this video is dedicated to the moral cataclysm that underpins all four conversations. This is between order and chaos.
Sam believes that there are two fundamental dangers to psychological and social stability. Religious fundamentalism, essentially on the right, and moral relativism and nihilism on the left. And so the danger of the right-wing position is that it enables people to arbitrarily establish certain revealed axioms as indisputable truth and then to tyrannize themselves and other people with the claims that those are divine revelations. So that's on the right. And then on the left, well, the problem with the moral relativism nihilism position is that it leaves us with no orientation, and it also flies in the face of common sense observations that there are ways to live that are bad and that there are ways to live that are good that people can generally.
A question I've asked myself as of late is why exactly were so many so excited to hear Jordan and Sam debate? Why was their conversation so prominent? What caused them to sell out such massive arenas?
So what is it specifically about your message or you as a person that's drawing these crowds of young men?
It's necessary to find in your life something truly engaging and meaningful, because otherwise life is so hard it will make you bitter and cruel.
Well, to name just a few reasons, Jordan was at the height of his fame. He had proven himself to be extremely insightful on a plethora of topics. He had said some quite frankly absurd things about atheists.
You can't be a non-believer in your action, you see, because Harris's metaphysics is fundamentally Christian. So he acts out a Christian metaphysics, but he says, well, I don't believe it. It's like, well, yeah, you do, because you're acting it out. You just say you don't believe it.
And both he and Sam had recently had a major epistemic disagreement on Sam's podcast.
Jordan, you have to grant one thing here. There's one piece that doesn't get moved here. You cannot move the piece that because you killed yourself, it's not true that she was having an affair. That move is not open to you, and yet you're acting like it is.
But I'm convinced that the primary reason for the excitement was simply the mere whiff of potential moral progress. As Jordan touched upon when still manning Sam's position, the world is slowly but surely outgrowing the dogma of religion, and thus we're ever more rejecting religion's assertion on divine objective morality. But we are having some serious teething problems. We have largely succumbed to what Nietzsche forewarned, moral relativism, the notion that morality is merely an opinion, shaped predominantly by the whims of culture.
Religious fundamentalism, essentially on the right, and moral relativism and nihilism on the left.
Indeed, as it stands, most religions claim jurisdiction over everyone's experience based on faith, whilst most irreligious people won't claim moral superiority whatsoever. While each religion confidently claims to know the answers to moral questions, and thus sees it as their duty to enforce the dogma on others, most irreligious people claim that there are no answers. And the result is what Sam would call suffering, and Jordan would call chaos.
There's two things you want to avoid, two catastrophes, let's say. One is the catastrophe that you identified with religious fundamentalism, and the other is the catastrophe that's associated with moral relativism. And that's something that I think we really agree on, because I've conceptualized that slightly different than you, and that might be relevant, but I think of that as a pathology of order and a pathology of chaos. So the terminology is slightly different, but I think we're working on the same axis.
Now what's fascinating is that both Sam and Jordan believe that they have a way in which to extinguish this moral cataclysm. Or at least in Jordan's case, he acts as if he has a solution. Sam's is direct. As is the thesis of his book titled The Moral Landscape, How Science Can Determine Human Values, he believes that questions of right and wrong relate to well-being, and that David Hume was mistaken when he voiced that you can't get an ought from an is. Sam thinks that you can. To be clear, while I share Sam's view on morality relating to well-being, and I also believe in an objective moral framework, I do not think that you can get an ought from an is. More on this in just a moment. Jordan, on the other hand, acts as if the answer resides within what Carl Jung termed our collective unconscious. That is, he believes that our unconscious mind, which is predicated on instincts, symbols, and archetypes, such as the Great Mother, the Wise Old Man, and the Tree of Life, underpins not only our moral framework, but our entire being. And he believes that these stories are most perfected in religious narratives. Thus, he believes that religious stories, such as Genesis, contain immense value, and that people such as Sam discard them at great cost. But as for whether Jordan actually believes that these archetypes and motifs constitute an objective moral framework, or if he just believes that it's the closest thing that we have to one, I'm not so certain. And I'm also not so sure on why he particularly elevates Christianity over other religions, other than the fact, of course, that he was born in a country in which Jesus' cock is rammed down everyone's throat. As it stands, at this moment, I've watched all 4 debates several times, but perhaps after a few more views, I'll finally ascertain the answer.
Someone once asked you whether you thought Jesus was literally resurrected, and you said it would take me 40 hours to answer that question.
Or maybe not.
How's this for an answer? Almost certainly not.
Now, as for my own views on morality, I'll give you a brief description, as I think it's only fair that you know my disposition. With that said, know that I'm operating at the peak of my knowledge here. While I've spent a significant amount of time ruminating morality, and consider myself relatively well read, I am nevertheless entirely self-taught, and so I might be missing something crucial. I've never had teachers to guide me. I'm a lone wolf, as it were.
Well, that's good wolf ethics.
But in a nutshell, I believe that Jeremy Bentham was bang on when he said that our sovereign masters are pain and pleasure, though I think that the word suffering is more accurate than the word pain. Absolutely everything that we do, at base, is in service of these 2 masters. Natural selection has hardwired sentient organisms to avoid suffering, as doing so leads to survival and in turn propagation. Hence, we are not born with a blank slate. We are born with the axiomatic goals of avoiding suffering and seeking pleasure, and there are scientifically, objectively, right and wrong ways in which to achieve these goals. Now, to be clear, there is nothing to say that we must or ought to obey these sovereign masters, but despite this, in every act we do, we are their slaves. To quote Bentham, every effort we make to throw off our subjection will serve but to demonstrate and confirm it. In words, man may pretend to abjure their empire, but in reality he will remain subject to it all the while. Thus, there is no violation of Hume's guillotine. I'm not getting an ought from an is, I'm getting an is from an is. I'm stating that there are scientifically, objectively, right and wrong ways in which to achieve our axiomatic goals, but I'm not stating that we ought to achieve our goals. Luckily for me, however, I don't need to convince you of that, since nature has already done that for me. Now, to put this in context of an example, if Allah really exists, then treating women as second-class citizens is objectively the right thing to do, since they will suffer far more in hell than they will under ruthless misogyny. But if Allah does not exist, then treating women as second-class citizens is objectively the wrong thing to do, since it causes suffering for no good gain. And not just to women, of course, but to men also. Again, there's nothing to say that we ought to fulfill our desire of avoiding suffering, but I don't need to convince you of that. You already accept it. Now, crucially, in most domains of discourse, be it climate change, vaccines, etc., we can debate the validity of the proposition, conduct empirical research, and we will only claim jurisdiction over others once we have overwhelming amounts of evidence. But when it comes to the domain of religion, all of this goes out of the damn window. To quote Tim Minchin, science adjusts its views based on what's observed. Faith is the denial of observation so that belief can be preserved. What's that? You think that we should debate whether Allah exists? Off with your head. How dare you use the brain that Allah gave you? This is why Sam, I, and many others say that the problem is dogma. But when it comes to dogma, religion is king, queen, and board. So for what it's worth, that's my views. I believe in an objective moral framework, but I differentiate from Sam in very important ways. Sam says that it's factually wrong to murder, whereas I say that it's factually wrong for you to murder, since it negates your goals. And by the word wrong, I just mean that it's not conducive to your goal. And Jordan says that it would take him 40 hours to tell you that it depends on what you mean by clean a room.
Why are you all applauding about that?
But sass aside, while I find Jordan's particular fixation on Christianity unjustified, I believe that there is indeed immense value in religious stories, and that we are yet to mine them for all their worth. Again, we're not born with a blank slate, and our religious stories and narratives very likely reflect this in ways that we're yet to comprehend. There's an archetypical gold mine, if you will, and we are on the margins of a potentially great harvest. But the dogma has to be rejected. And if we can only mine these stories by giving the dogma a free pass, then I'd sooner collapse the whole damn thing. Religion has had its fill of blood, and I won't intentionally give it another drop. We need to have respect for our past, but we also have to embrace the future bravely. Anyhow, before wrapping up, I'd like to give a shout out to the Kickstarter project Kittens vs Puppies. The creator is one of my close friends, and he's someone who's helped me significantly improve my own game, Debunked. He's played tabletop games for over a decade, and this really shows in his own game. In short, Kittens vs Puppies is a deck-building card game in which you lead 3 adorable champions to capture your opponents. Your fluffballs start off weak, but within a few short turns of strategic deck building, they become absolute monsters. If this sounds up your street, and I mean, it's kittens, puppies and fun, please follow the link below to find out more. It's truly an incredibly fun game. Anyhow, I'm Stephen Woodford, and as always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and those of you who have supported the channel via other means. You are all legends.